Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Supercharging Marketing Operations with Advanced Agents. I'm Nisha Sharma, Senior Vice President of Partnerships here at MediaMint, and I'll be your host for today's session. AI has quickly moved from being an experimental technology to becoming a core part of how marketing organizations operate. But the real opportunity isn't simply adopting AI, it's figuring out how to deploy it responsibly, integrate it into existing workflows, and create measurable business value. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by three leaders who bring perspectives on that journey, from technology and digital engagement to enterprise marketing operations and AI transformation. Together, we'll explore what's actually working, what organizations are learning as they scale AI, and what marketing leaders should be doing today to prepare for what's next. So joining us today is Peter Krupkovich, CEO of Bitly. Peter brings a technology and platform perspective, helping brands drive measurable growth through smarter digital engagement and understanding how AI can be embedded into the tools marketers rely on every day. We're also joined by Luke Catmull, Director of Sales Operations and Intelligence at Bonneville International. Luke brings a practitioner's perspective, leading sales operations and intelligence, and seeing firsthand how AI is reshaping marketing and revenue operations within a media organization. And finally, we have Elon Nass, Executive Vice President of Marketing Services at MediaMint. Elon works closely with enterprise marketing organizations to operationalize AI, helping clients move from experimentation to scalable production-ready marketing flows. So thank you all for being with us today. To get started, I'd like to begin with a quick pulse check. AI adoption looks very different from one organization to the next. So let's start by understanding where each of you is on that journey. So maybe on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate your organization's AI maturity today? And very briefly, perhaps what's driving that score? I guess, Elon, maybe I'll start with you. You're on mute, Elon.
I'm on mute. Thank you. This is the most classic Zoom mistake ever. So I would say that MediaMint is it's hard to categorize, but I'd say an 8. Knowing that the honest answer for most of the industry is closer to a 4. And what's driving our score is that AI is not a side project for us anymore. So across MediaMint, it's embedded in how we run campaigns and produce creative and do reporting, and increasingly how we get we get clients found inside of AI answers themselves. So we engage in something called AEO, which is answer engine optimization. We even have our own proprietary AI solution called Mia. So we built our own AI agents. What keeps me from saying 9 or 10 is that this stuff compounds monthly, right? McKinsey found that something like 88% of companies now use AI somewhere, but only like 6% are high performers that actually move the P&L. So I'm intentionally saying that we have to be a little uncomfortable at times. And the minute we feel like we have a problem solved, the frontier moves, right? So here at MediaMint, we put a huge emphasis on making sure that AI is at the forefront of what we do, of how we service our customers, and we constantly learning and building, but there's always more to do. So I won't say a 9 or a 10. I will say an 8.
All right. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I would probably put us at a maybe 6.5 for being true and honest here. We've moved past the experimentation phase. AI is kind of part of our daily operations now, whether it's pipeline intelligence, forecasting, audience insights, or just automating some proposal workflow. It's like it's not a side project anymore. It's just woven into how we work. And where we're really still growing is scaling that consistency across the other departments that we have. So some of our departments have adopted this quicker than others. And so the technology is really not the bottleneck, it's the change management. And it's getting people to trust the outputs and to shift their habits and to think of AI as a partner in their workflow rather than just something extra on their plate.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about change management and driving that adoption. So stay tuned for that. But apologies, it looks like Peter is having some trouble joining, but that's okay. We'll continue and catch him up when he joins. But thanks for sharing that, both Luke and Elon. And I think Luke, you've shared that you're pretty far down the journey on this, but I think over the past year, just amongst all of our client conversations and what we've seen organizations doing, I think that the conversation has shifted. We have moved beyond just asking, can AI do this, or what can I do with AI, to how do we actually operationalize it at scale? And I think marketing leaders are now focused on putting that AI into production in ways that can actually improve day-to-day operations and business outcomes. So, Elon, I want to start with you on this because you've had a front row seat to how multiple organizations, are operationalizing AI. What are the use cases that are actually gaining traction and delivering measurable value, both within MediaMint and how we use it, but also across the clients that you've been working with?
So, to me, the most meaningful use cases are the boring ones. And I mean that as a compliment, right? So a lot of people, I just came back from Cannes a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of people like to talk about AI making a Super Bowl ad, right? When is an AI ad going to win an Emmy? And that might be where the attention lies, but it's not where the ROI is, right? The ROI is in the operational middle of marketing. It's performance reporting that used to eat 2 days now runs continuously with agents pulling from every platform. It's creative versioning and testing. So not generating creative, but versioning it and testing it, and not replacing the big idea, but going from 5 ad variants to 50 and letting the data pick the winners. Klarna famously took campaign image production from 6 weeks to 7 days or something like that. Um, and this also goes with like things like data and segmentation. So we're having conversations now about how we can build what we call a segment of one. So how can on for people we work with, companies we work with, if they have a lot of customers, how do they build communication with customers based on their personal behaviors? Right, rather than trying to pull segments all the time and launch campaigns towards like, okay, let's target people who are between the ages of 18 and 29 who have not used our product in the past 6 weeks, right? And how can we build individualized conversations and personalized conversations to them? The main marketing, the sexy part of marketing, the loud part is not the part that's going to be changing. It's the handoffs, it's the grunt work, it's the editing and clipping, and those things are where the real ROI is. And it does translate to KPIs, right? Because if your marketing team is more efficient, you can create more concepts, you can launch more campaigns, you can do it with fewer mistakes, you will see the KPIs move.
Yeah. Luke, what about you? What are your most meaningful use cases?
Yeah, we've got a few. Maybe I can share an example that we started at the beginning of this year. We wanted to improve the efficiency of our sales teams. So we created a prospecting agent specifically designed for our sales teams. And what this did is it pulled data, marketing data, and research data on clients. So for our sales team, they wanted to work with, ABC client. They could just talk with this agent about it, and it would pull in research data that we pay for and give a synopsis on this client, give insights on this client, draft a cold call script, an email script. It would pose CNA questions potentially. I mean, it like laid out everything for our sales users so that they can be quicker. This was our first iteration of it, and looking back at it, it's very, very, very basic. Now, where we're at with this one is we've integrated it with our CRM. So our sales users can not only prospect and research and reach out to um, clients using this agent, but they can also log their activity, research those clients and match them up against what's in our CRM. They can send emails directly from the agent. So we started incorporating this into a lot of the other tools that our sales users are using so that they can be as efficient as possible. And they're not just using it as maybe a Google chat, they're actually using it to help them in the workflow. And so we've made a lot of progress over the past 6 months on this, and then I'm honestly really excited to see where this goes in the next 6 months.
And I'm just curious, like, how did you decide on that use case? Like, where was it? Was it a part of your strategy? Was it a priority, or was this just an idea that somebody had? How did that come about?
Yeah, as we're thinking about like how do we apply AI to what we're doing at our company, it's what are the problems to solve? right? What are the big issues that we need to solve? And then how can we use AI to solve that? It is a time saver, but it's also I'll talk about it a little bit later, but it saves a lot of the manual and tedious work that people are used to doing. You evolve from becoming more of an executor to more of a strategist. Um, so the dynamic just changes on it. So anyways, the point is we came up with this idea because we needed more efficient sales staff. And so what are the problems to solve and how we're going to solve it? And that's sort of where the idea was born from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it
And
helps
thank you.
to, yeah, sometimes I feel like sometimes Lucas said, like, it helps to like just ask your own team and organization, like, what's the most tedious thing that you do? Like, what's the most obnoxious thing that you have to do all the time? And then you find your workflows that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So thank you. Those are great examples to hear. But I think as part of this, getting to seeing these successful rollouts is, I think, very rarely a straight line. So along the way, I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons. Maybe Luke, what are some of the common challenges or unexpected lessons that you all have encountered along the way, and what advice would you offer to someone who may be going through that now?
Was this question for me first?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Luke. Yeah, well, maybe I'll start with you.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Oh, that's okay.
Sorry.
Just wanted to make sure I wasn't stepping on someone's. Yeah, I think one of if you could go back in time, hindsight is always 2020. You can see a little bit better. If you could go back in time and change things, what would we do? I think we were maybe too ambitious without getting the actual user feedback first. So we designed this agent without actually getting some of the sales staff involved first to sort of pilot and give us some insight and impact. And so as we started to roll this out, there was some resistance, but there was also some feedback of like, hey, this actually isn't how this isn't as useful as you think it is. And so if we could go back in time, the idea that we had was spot on in what we wanted to do for our prospecting agent. It was just a matter of bringing the right people in earlier and help them be a part of this creation process and then see it in fruition because the adoption of that, I think, would have been a lot smoother from our side.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. Yeah. Elon, have you seen any challenges or lessons learned?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I think everyone likes the quote MIT's MIT put out a report a while ago that says, like, 95% of Gen AI pilots show no measurable P&L impact. And for me, the failures are almost never the model. Just like Lucas said, they're organizational, right? So you have your patterns of like first bolting AI onto a workflow instead of redesigning the workflow. So sometimes the workflow itself is the strongest predictor of whether or not you're going to get the impact from the AI. So people who succeed are three times more likely to do that. So re-examining the workflow first and then building the agent on top of it is usually the best way to do it. Second is I find that if you put a pilot with no senior sponsor and no baseline metric, that's a demo, not a deployment, right? So we need somebody to own the project. It's your responsibility. It's your job to make sure that this gets over the finish line and it gets adopted. Um, and there's, under investing in that is one aspect. Another that I found is more of like a hack than it is a problem is I spoke to somebody who on the PE side who said that whenever they implemented a new AI workflow, they would design it as a push rather than a pull. So instead of asking your organization to go out and use a tool, the tool pushes itself into your workflow on its own. So let me give you an example is um, whenever we're dealing with client, this is internal to us, like we're dealing with like a client facing call. We built a tool that helps people do research on the prospect or the client and kind of reviews their past few calls and sort of pulls up a profile on them so you have more context. It just pushes into your inbox as opposed to you having to go grab it from somewhere, right? And we have found that when you push it, people see the value more likely. So if there's triggers, if there's alerts, if there's messages being sent to you as a user of it, you're more likely to adopt the flow than you are to be told, please go use this tool.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense too. Peter has joined us. Peter, thanks.
Yeah.
Glad to have you on. I'll just step back here for a second and ask you the same question I asked Elon and Luke as well. But from a scale of 1 to 10, if you were to rate your organization's maturity with AI, how would you rate yourself? And
Yeah,
what's behind that?
we have an internal scale. It starts at L0 where you're basically not using it much. L1 is like kind of use it like a power version of Google search. L2 is teams use it. L3 is you're working across teams, and 4 and 5 we can't even see yet, but that's like sort of the full agentic loop. We are, I would say, 10 to 20% of the org is sitting in the L0s that we've kind of basically pulled them aside and said, it's now or never. The vast majority are sitting at L1, meaning that they are power users or becoming power users, getting very comfortable, but they're operating like individuals. And now we've got about 20% of the org that's moved into that L2 zone where they're starting to actually do full workflows and run across within their departments. L3, which we're aspiring to get to by the end of the year, is running across departments where work moves from a product manager through a designer through an engineer, and all of that might be being done by even one person or one team, but across all those functions. So I guess given that scoring, I'd give us like a 4 out of 10. But I would say at the beginning of the year, we were at a 2, and last year we were at a 0.5. So there's a lot of acceleration into it, I think, as we've gotten smarter, and we've been put a lot of energy into creating, I guess, what I would call kind of evangelists and power users within the company. And the more you have of those, the easier it gets to bring everybody else along because there's just increasing amounts of people and it's not a tops down.
I would actually give you a higher score just because you have that internal model.
I don't know. Maybe we're tough graders. Maybe we're tough graders ourselves. We're sitting in Silicon Valley, so maybe there's enough FOMO about what everybody else is doing that we have a high bar.
That's awesome. All right. I want to go on here to tech stack a little bit, right? As I think we know, we've heard some great examples, but I think we all realize that AI just doesn't exist in isolation, right? And to really deliver value and get the most from your AI, it has to work with the data that you have, the systems, the workflows that your organizations already have in place, right? And so, some organizations go with just modernizing their entire tech stack and, ripping and replacing, other, technologies that they've had for years and years. But others also realize that, hey, that's just not possible. And so we've got to layer things in and really build that. But ultimately, that underlying foundation really matters. And so, Peter, I'll start with you on this one. But as marketing teams are evolving their tech stack, what capabilities have you seen that have become really essential? And what's been your organization's approach in terms of how you've gone about modernizing your own tech stack? Did you decide to rip and replace things, or are you taking a more practical approach in some ways?
Yeah, we haven't done the blow everything to smithereens and start over approach, but what we have done is very deliberately taken a step back, picked the couple of platforms that we feel like can continue to sit in the center as like nodes. And as those platforms have leaned into this environment, they've built out their interoperability in a great way. So I think we've been very specific which platforms we've decided to invest in behind. And then we've also identified that we ourselves have to build our own internal version of that. Our version would be, we call it basically like a knowledge center that the marketing team uses. So if you imagine all your press releases, all your brand assets, all your marketing copy, all of your customer data all sitting in a zone into a sort of clean space. And the reason why we've realized that's the key is whether it's humans or agents that are going to run across it, you need everybody being able to pull off of those. And if everybody has access to that, those workflows that we talk about that can move from not just being a siloed department, but running across departments can go much faster. I was right before this call, our designer, one of our designers, our engineering team had built out this internal product called Shipyard. But effectively, what you said was, this is so great because we're updating some of our marketing copy and our positioning throughout the site. She herself, as a designer, was able to use this, pull off of all the new messaging that was uploaded and run in throughout the entire site and do it in 5 to 7 minutes versus that being an entire project and workflow. But we needed it to be living in a place where, whether you're a designer, a product manager, all the way to a go-to-market lifecycle person. And as that team said, this is your new messaging. She went and said, great, that's the new messaging. I'm going to go update the entire site. And that was it. And it was done very quickly. But it's that key foundational piece. And before we had it, even if you layer in AI, you're still running into 32 different systems and it's a coordination exercise. And that's what really makes it feel like you're doing a lot, but you don't really feel, maybe going back to the comment Ian was making, I think that goes to the MIT study. It's like, I feel like I'm using it a lot, but it's not really unlocking anything for me yet. And so that's the area that we've been spending a lot of time on.
Okay. Luke, how about you? What
Yeah, I
capabilities have
think
you really had to build in?
from our perspective, if you've ever seen the back end of what it takes to execute a marketing campaign and run those efficiently, and then if you're working with advertisers, it's a lot. It's complicated. There's a ton of steps and there's a ton of systems. For us, not to speak to a specific system in particular, but we're trying to consolidate those to make it easier. There's a lot of advantages that AI brings as it relates to this execution model on the back end, where we are used to logging into 20, 30 different systems and tools and platforms just to keep things afloat. How can we drastically reduce that down to where you're only using a couple, but the framework is all backed by artificial intelligence? That you can just use that to drastically streamline some of those tedious things that you're doing in order to focus on the bigger picture of stuff. So, not to call out any sort of tools that we're using in particular. We're just trying to reduce the number of tools that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Elon, from your perspective, as you've been talking to clients, I mean, what else are you seeing happening when it comes to that tech stack?
So one thing that we've been talking a lot about with customers is the idea of all these SaaS platforms that we're all used to using all becoming like AI enabled, which is good. I mean, that's great. I'm glad that they have the AI enablement, but they're still SaaS tools at the end. And ultimately what ends up happening is that an organization has to like kind of like fit itself, like square peg and round hole itself into the workflow that SaaS tool demands of them. And so what we really, I've really come to the conclusion that like true AI enablement and unlocking happens when you build agents for your own workflow and for your company to do what you needed to do, while you can still use tools and MCPs and what you have. Like, I don't think in the near future anyone's moving away from Salesforce, for example. No one's rebuilding Salesforce. I'm going to buy that stock probably. That's not insider information. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I think there's a lot of tools that you just don't need anymore. And you can just build your own variant of them that are kind of tailored to you. It might come with some glitches along the way. And with that, the question you asked was like, what sort of like capabilities do you need? Being able to read into and measure where the agent and where the human step in is a skill in and of itself. Because if you think of AI enablement, it's really this like it's like a spectrum. There's one end of it, which is just conversational AI, help me come up with ideas, help me come up with names, help me come up with taglines. And then you can move into the agent. An agent can actually build a document for you or build a strategy for you. And then that can move into the AI is deploying the campaigns, the AI is measuring the results. And then you can the far end of it, which I don't think anybody is there is full native AI marketing from end to end. Like there's no humans in the loop anymore. That no one's there. So the question becomes like every step of your workflow, where does the human intervention begin and the machine end? And that skill of being able to detect where the judgment layer is and where the decision-making layer is, I think is a very important one. But I also want to back up to back up what Peter was saying, which is the data is everything. There are a lot of times we have conversations where everyone's really excited about this cool thing we can do, and then we realize you can't do it because the data estate is not in order. And the larger your organization is, the more imperative this becomes. And we're here, we're partnered with Databricks and Snowflake, and we work with the different groups, but whomever you're working with that has your data lake, that is the most important thing, is to have all the data be unified and trustworthy. Then your agents can be built. Then all the fun stuff gets unlocked. But that boring layer needs to be done first.
Totally agree. And
Absolutely.
also, just to build on that, the example I used, that was to your point, that was an internal tool that we built. I mean, it was injected with some of the
Yeah.
back end of AI, but it was an internal thing that went, this is the way that we can like unlock and build and ship. And so it's called Shipyard, but we had to build it internally to basically do what we wanted to do. And that is getting as much or more use than any of the handful of like off the shelf things that we bought.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all getting into a zone where we're deciding when it comes to software, because marketing tech stacks are out of control, and have been for years. All of us are using dozens of pieces of software a day, including the one we're on right now, Zoom.
Yeah.
So whether or not you keep it, rebuild it, repurpose it, or eliminate it, replace it with an agent, replace it with an alternative vibe coded solution is, part of the journey is figuring out where the line begins and where the line ends on what can be done in house, or what you still have to use the off the shelf product for.
I would share like two red flags that you're doing a lot, but you haven't yet arrived at where I think you're really unlocking value. One of them is your organization looks identical to when you started. Same roles, same people, same structure. If that's
Have
if
different
that's the
jobs. Yeah.
case, you are not yet there. I mean, it's just because jobs change and evolve and the skills evolve, right? The people that are starting to stand out in our company they pop in areas that I would say are more strategic, creative, idea oriented, and a lot less hardcore, just accuracy, volume, like rote work. So that's one. The other thing would be the automation or the gains that you're seeing fall apart if the person who is currently handling them leaves. If that's not really, you haven't built any that, you haven't actually built it into the company. That's just Sarah or Larry or Paul is just really, really good at making a bunch of stuff happen, but it's not actually yet built into your company. When you really get true unlock of workflows, that's just how the company now builds products, launches new creative, puts out, additional materials, communicates with customers. That's just how work is getting done. And now you're inserting people to help manage it. If that person leaves and the whole thing falls down, it is not yet how you work. That's just having a really good person, which is extremely valuable in the early days and even some of the days right now. But where you're aspiring to get to is that's just how work gets done.
Yeah, you've now gotten into you touched on the topic of humans, which is where I wanted to go next, right? Because as you said, right, we're embedding more AI into marketing operations, and it's changing the way that people work and where they create the greatest value. And so, Luke, I wanted to start with you on this one, and get your thoughts on as agents are taking on more of that operational work, how is the role of human expertise evolving, and where do humans still create the greatest value?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about it a lot, just because we operate in an industry where trust is our product. I would say there are three ways where I see human expertise becoming more valuable. The first is relational intelligence. AI can score a lead, it can surface the prospect's website, get competitor information, et cetera, et cetera. But it may not know that the client's business has just changed ownership. or there's a community event coming up that creates a perfect sponsorship moment. That kind of local relational knowledge is something that our account executives carry, and it's hard to replace. In local media, the depth of those relationships is what wins and retains businesses. The second is the shift from doing to directing. So this is probably the biggest evolution I've seen on my team. Our people used to spend a large portion of their week pulling reports, formatting decks, building audience profiles, etc. AI handles a lot of that now. So what are they doing instead? They're reviewing AI generated outputs. They're asking better questions. They're making higher order decisions about where to invest time and resources. And I said this earlier, but the role kind of shifts from being an executor to an orchestrator, to a strategist. And I personally think one of the skills that you absolutely have to have now is prompt engineering. You have to be good at prompt engineering to be effective with AI. And if you're using it like you would Google, that's probably a good indication that you have some stuff to learn, to improve on. The third I would say is brand stewardship. So in media, every decision about what content we associate with an advertiser or how we frame a sponsorship or when we say no to a deal carries a reputational weight. Um, AI can flag opportunities, but a human has to like own the final call. You cannot automate the editorial judgment, and you cannot automate trust, and I don't think you should try. So to sum it up, AI is handling the repetitive data heavy work that used to consume most of our team's time. That is freeing our people to do what they are uniquely good at, which is building relationships, exercising judgment, and thinking strategically. So the role of human expertise isn't shrinking, it's just moving upstream.
I love that, especially the judgment piece, right? And the trust, like you mentioned, right? People trust you, they trust your brand, they trust that. So you've got to make sure that no matter how you're rolling out your AI and your agents, that you still have that level of trust, right? And we're not ready, like Elon, right? You said that no one's doing this without a human in there. So, that implies that we need to be the ones to maintain that trust and make sure that it's delivering as we expect. But yeah, Elon, Peter, any what else would you add?
I think I think if there was a way to put a finer point on what Lucas was saying, because he's absolutely right. Like, there's no doubt about it that everything he said was right. He pretty much answered the question that humans have to move up the stack and move into a judgment layer. I think the differentiator becomes taste. It's taste. It's the one thing that the AI doesn't have. At least right now, it doesn't have, and it's the understanding the emotional impact. It's understanding the messaging and what the goal is, and what you're trying to achieve, and how to build a brand, right? So taste becomes a differentiator, and the challenge is that in marketing, taste is not something that can be trained. Taste is something that's innate. And so the people who I think in our world who are going to be the most successful in using AI are the people who are going to be able to judge based on taste. So you've got, you know, Coca-Cola might get, you know, creamed for an AI Christmas ad that gets roasted on social media, but yet it scores in the top tier of ad effectiveness when they test it, right? Um, and then you have another, I think there was I have notes here in front of me. There was a Harris poll that found that 70% of consumers say AI ads feel like they're missing soul and they prefer human made work. That's not the fault of the AI. That's the fault of the human judgment on top of the AI, right? That's someone that's not doing a good job of understanding that and creating work slop, right? We've all had that scenario where we've received an email from someone and they forgot to remove the chat GPT. Like, I've completed your email for you. Like, we've all had that moment. And that's someone who's not checking their work, and not that's just they're allowing the agent to just do a job for them without playing their role, which is this the right thing to do, and is this the right way to do it?
I totally agree. Not much, I mean, not much to add on top of it. I think if you believe that that's where all the value sits, which I fundamentally agree with both of these guys, that's where it is. The question is, how do you measure the evolution and progress that you're making as an organization if you believe that's where it goes? Because you built a company around a certain amount of work being done, and if a lot of that work is the rote work and the time-consuming work and the stuff that you can hand off. And increasingly, you're moving it to these other skill sets. That's kind of where I get to the like, if your organization looks the exact same as it did before, you're not fully there, or maybe you haven't quite evolved it, because what we've all been saying by definition is where value sits is shifting, right? And as that value shifts, how your company operates has to shift with it, right?
I'm curious, so we've talked about in your own organization, but in the world of marketing, in the world of publisher operations and all of this, right, there's quite a bit of collaboration with other partners and other, third parties that you would work with. So I'm curious, has AI had an impact on how you are collaborating with those other partners, and what are you seeing there? Luke, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've had this we've adopted AI in many use cases as it relates to servicing our marketing efforts. Our clients are also adopting AI to evaluate the performance of those efforts that we're making. And so we're both using these tools to evaluate the very work that's being done there. So there's just a level of communication that needs to happen first with the advertisers that we're working with, and then it's more collaborative. I think so. It does shift things a little bit. I mean, um, because agencies or advertisers have these tools, they're they have more. I guess they're smarter as it relates to the strategic part of the campaign. They're asking better questions. They're interacting more with us, it seems like. And so I just think there's a evolution that we're still trying to fine tune from our side of the best way to work with each other, knowing that we're both using AI to get to the same end goal. We just don't want to use it counterintuitively.
If I jump in, I would say we've become more ambitious about what we think we can deliver our customers and how as to what they expect from us. So there were customers that, we've got a broad array from the largest companies in the world down to prosumers and small businesses. But our ability to create in-depth, regularly, automated or not, analysis of how everything's going, what's going on, what's happening, what we're doing new, how it affects them, all of that. We're able to start to scale that in a much more interesting and meaningful way than we could have ever done before, because we would have had to use humans for everything and throw human hours at it. And at a certain point, it just isn't a good business. But as a lot of that has collapsed, our ability to engage our customers in different ways has gone way up. And we're watching that they are, because they're getting it from us, but also from other folks, competitive or not, probably not, but in other areas, they're going, this is kind of what we want to see now too. I don't care if I'm spending $1,000 a year. I want a QBR deck in my inbox that breaks down everything that's going on there. I want recommendations that come with it based on your new products and your roadmap. And you're like, yeah, we could probably do that. Actually, it's not that. Now, I mean, within a structured way. So it's allowing us, the positive side is it would be allowing us to evolve how we think about our business, our relationship with our customers, and maybe even our business model. But the con side, or the pressure side, would be, if you don't do it, your competitors are for sure going to be doing it, and your customers are going to start to demand it. So you got to start heading down that track.
Nisha, you asked about publishers, right?
Sure, publisher operations as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because this one's close to home. So, a big part of MediaMint's business is running marketing, ad ops, and revenue operations for publishers. So we sit in the middle of that publisher, agency, advertiser collaboration every day. And from my perspective, three shifts are happening. First, the handoffs are compressing. So I think Peter spoke to this as well, but things like RFP responses, audience research, proposal building, that used to be days of work across 3 teams. And now in AI and the workflow, it's hours, sometimes minutes. So when the admin shrinks, the conversation between a publisher and an advertiser changes character. You're taking outcomes and the ideas instead of chasing insertion orders and screenshots, right? Second is the interface between the partners is starting to become almost entirely machine to machine. So the industry launched this ad context protocol last fall. So Pubmatic, Yahoo, Scope3, Triton. It's where a buyer's agent takes a plain language brief and negotiates directly with a publisher's sales agent. And I think that this cycle's open RTP moment. You know what I mean? It's like you can already see the direction in audio. Like 82% of agencies buy audio programmatically now, and it was like double what it was in 2022. And third, and this is what we tell our publisher clients, the ops team moves up the value chain, which I think we've already spoken about. But you're talking trafficking, reconciliation, reporting automations, operations stops being a cost center and becomes the intelligence layer. So yield strategy, packaging, first-party data products. These are the publishers who win the agentic era, are the ones whose inventory and pricing and data are clean and machine readable enough that a buying agent can trust them. And that's an operations problem. And it's exactly the kind of work most publishers underinvest in my opinion, today.
Appreciate that. Okay, just a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We'll hopefully be able to get to them. I want to now just shift to success, right? So, the question that quickly rises to the top while we're doing all of this is, how do we know that our AI investments are actually paying off, right? Success isn't about how many agents you build, right? But it's really about the business outcomes that you're creating, right? That they're creating. So, Elon, from what you've seen, how are organizations defining and measuring success? And how do you know whether an AI agent is genuinely creating business value beyond just, knowing that it's running?
So it's running is the most expensive sentence in AI. An agent that runs isn't an asset. An agent that beats a baseline is. So Peter's been talking about this a lot, is like, making sure the measurements are on point. So you have to hold your agents to the same discipline as others, as any other action. So, the hours, costs, error rates, cycle times. So if you don't beat baseline, you can't prove anything, and most companies can't, right? Something like, what was it? 7% of enterprises have an established AI ROI, and I think it was Deloitte that said that just 10% of agentic AI adopters are seeing significant measurable returns. So it's actually very, very common for companies to invest in AI and not actually see measurable returns. And it comes down to that old adage of that which is measured gets improved, right? If you're not really just launching the AI isn't enough. And so measuring the cost per completed task, fully loaded, tokens, tooling, and even the human review time. An agent creates value when its success rate is high enough that checking its work costs less than doing the work. And that is not necessarily an automatic given, right? So there's also connected to a business KPI, not an activity KPI. So for us, when we do marketing stuff, we don't look at necessarily, how many assets are produced and we call that a win. We say, are those assets driving KPIs on marketing? Is the cost of acquisition dropping because we're versioning so many different variants of an image, right? Or an ad asset. So the business KPI is the key. So it's not the agent sent 10,000 emails. It's the pipeline per dollar of marketing ops spend improved 30%, right? And give every agent an owner with a scorecard and review it quarterly, just like a team member. The agent needs to prove itself like a team member. If the agent does not do its job, it gets fired. So that, we have to treat our agents like we would anybody else in the organization. There needs to be a scorecard, there needs to be performance, there needs to be measurable impact, and discipline. And the discipline to kill agents is what funds the ones that work, in my opinion.
Peter and Luke, are you assessing and analyzing your agents and giving them a score? How do you measure success?
I think that's such a good question to ask. For me, there's sort of two buckets, right? And we touched on that a little bit. There's a quantifiable bucket where I'm measuring a measurable number to prove that this AI agent is either generating a positive ROI, improving efficiency, reducing errors, whatever that is. So that's a number you can measure. But I also think that there's an area that I think we're all maybe struggling to measure a little bit, and that is, how do you quantify you working with an agent that helps you problem solve a very complex problem that you've had before and work through some of that with your team? That part is a little bit harder to actually put a revenue dollar to, but you've in turn actually created a more efficient way to do something, or you've initiated a new project that will eventually lead to either more efficiency or better results or a better outcome. And that those things are a little bit more difficult to quantify, to measure, but I still think we need to keep those in mind because personally, our team has solved really complex problems that we've had in our org just by collaborating together and with AI. And so I think those need to also be considered in some way. We're trying to figure out the best way to do it as well.
I saw Savannah threw a question in, so maybe I can weave this into that. I think sometimes what we have been doing is I agree with everything it said. We are a KPI heavy, and I think our definition of success has something changed for the better before or after we inserted this in here. The one maybe slight wrinkle I would put in is sometimes when you're layering in some level of automation or an agent, it is just in a box and you just watch it and see what it does, and you're comparing it to how you used to do it before. To some extent, we've been looking at it a little bit more like we've got this team and this function and these motions that we have, and where's everybody spending all their hours? And then oftentimes, historically, you've gotten this huge chunk of hours in stuff that I think we would all agree we have parts of our jobs that you're like, this is not the highest value thing I'm doing, but I just got to do it. And it takes me X amount of hours a day or a week or a month to get done. Just got to do it. That's the lowest hanging fruit, in our opinion. That is the easiest to solve. It's usually the most rote work. It fits the best in what I would call the current maturity of the AI cycle. What we have done, and maybe this goes to where Savannah said, I think when we get into some of the newer stuff, and so when you do that, one of the KPIs you're seeing is just time given back to the other folks that were there, right? Going, great, you don't have to spend 50% of your time on this anymore. That is free. Let's go pull you into something that is harder or more challenging, involves more creativity. Going to Savannah's question on there, basically, some detail on a process they follow to spec and create an agent. What we found most successful is start with some outcome that you want to achieve. So for us, it might be, I would love before any one of our salespeople gets on a call that they can generate a QBR doc and it shows up in their inbox 2 days before the meeting that's on their calendar, and they have a chance to review it 2 days before, and it's already prepackaged so that when they get on the call and 2 days later, they're fully prepped. That's the goal. Start with the goal, build your way back into the workflow and the systems that you need to create that. And that mindset has been the easiest for us to start. And sometimes, by the way, you start and go, that's our goal, and you get into it, you're like, turns out that's impossible because maybe we don't have the foundational systems in place or the assets or the materials, but then that becomes an opportunity. But oftentimes, if you start by going, this is what I want to achieve, can I go achieve it? Those are the best ideas to start with, and then build your way back down, right? That and where is all the hours being spent that is relatively low value, but chewing up a lot of time. Those have been the two areas that we've attacked the most that have translated to the most tangible, like, this is better than where we were before.
Very helpful. Thank you, Peter, for that. I know we're getting towards the end of our time, and I want to make sure we touch on the topic of cost, right? Because we know that as you scale AI, your usage increases, but then so do your token, your compute, and your infrastructure costs. And so that then starts to become a real problem, right? So I want to touch on like what strategies are actually working, and how are you in your organization? What are you all doing to keep those AI costs down and under control without slowing down adoption? And yeah, so let's start with you on this, Peter.
I would say if you're very early on in your curve, I personally don't think that having everybody try to figure out how to manage costs. This is going to say I was formerly a CFO, so now my CFO friends are gonna have a talking to me after this and go like, this is not what you're supposed to say. I don't think over rotating into costs when you're trying to get a company to just lean in and adopt AI is helpful because it, it's not like some wildly out of control thing where you wake up one day and go like, oh my God, so and so just spent $7 million and we didn't know what was happening. It's actually much harder to really lean into it. Now, that being said, once you get going, you really need to have sort of a process and how you want to communicate so you don't do duplicative work, and also that these agents and these motions have a real ROI to it. Because some of the early days where people learning are almost like vibe coding and just practicing and trying stuff out. So my personal opinion is I wouldn't initially, when you're trying to get the company motivated and interested, go, great, you should start playing around, but just so you know, don't do too much because I think it's a mistake. That being said, we end up now having a little bit more of a cross-functional team who you sort of, when you're building new motions and building new automation into it, is designed to help ensure, one, that doesn't already exist and someone hasn't already built that. And two, as it gets going, we sort of do a 30 and 90-day check to go, what is this designed to do? And is it accomplishing it? And do we need it to the degree? We had one person that built an agent and was like, just feed me the data every 7 minutes. And you're like, that's totally unnecessary. Do you need it every 7 minutes? You're like, no, I really need it like once a day. You're like, okay, great. It's a much lower cost. So you kind of iterate on those things, but I just wouldn't over rotate right out of the gate when you're early on it. I think there's been these big headlines, rightfully so, that some huge companies with, 20,000 engineers can really run up a tab. If you don't fall into that bucket and you're in more of a control group, I think it's more manageable. But that's my opinion. I also think token costs are going to come way down. So I also think that
Token
step
costs
one is getting going,
yeah.
and but you have to have a strategic viewpoint on that. Mine is that a year from now, it will be less expensive, and some of the stuff you're reading, even most recently with open models versus the closed ones, would suggest that there is a path where the cost to do this will drop meaningfully.
The token models are definitely dropping. I think that the AI bills go up because agentic workflows are still using orders of magnitude more tokens than a chat prompt. And the
Sure.
cost per task can vary wildly, by the run. So the unit that matters, I would challenge and say it isn't the price per token, it's the cost per completed task versus the human baseline.
Yep.
And to what you were saying, having a smaller test phase is definitely a step in the right direction. I don't know if you spoke about routing the model. I don't know if I caught that or not, but
No,
you did, right?
but I agree. I know where you're going. Yeah.
So like matching the model to the task. You don't need a frontier reasoning model to like reformat a report, right? You don't need to use Opus 4.8 or Fathom to do that. So
it'd be like having a DoorDash person rent a Ferrari to drop off your
right,
It's like
right.
you still need that much firepower, right?
Right. So dropping the model down to the appropriate model for the task, caching aggressively. So cached content is obviously cheaper. Batch anything that isn't real time for another 50% in savings. Put per workflow budgets and anomaly alerts in place before the scale, not after. Treating tokens like media spend, right? So just like be careful with your tokens, with your pacing and your caps, and reevaluate models quarterly because they change and the pricing changes. There's also local models. So if you have the capacity to stand up a computer, you can run local models for certain things. And then have the frontier, the expensive stuff, doing the overall strategic thinking or really sensitive checks or something like that. But it can be controlled. It can be controlled. I just think that a lot of companies, like to Peter's point, are just scaling wildly without thinking about it, and then they wake up and they're like, "Oops, we have a $300,000 token expense this month." I did want to talk to this one person who wrote in the chat. Somebody wrote that Savannah wanted like some detail on how we actually build agents, like the process we follow. So to answer your question, Savannah, like for us, literally starts in a doc. You write a one-page spec, like a job description for a new hire. The workflow the agent owns, its inputs, its outputs, what system it's allowed to touch, then where it must stop and hand off to a human, its success metric. Then you prototype, no code. So you can just use Claude or ChatGPT with the spec pasted in as instructions and then manually run it against 20 or 30 historical examples, which will kill or validate the idea in like a week. right? Once it passes, then you get to the wiring up. So you can use N8N, Zapier, Copilot, an agent connected to tools. You can handle most of it. And a dev team only enters when deep API work or custom data plumbing is necessary, which is like maybe like 1 in 5. Then it runs in parallel with the human process for 2 weeks before it flies solo. That's how you would do it. So Google Doc to manual prototype to no code orchestration to devs, parallel run to production.
Ours is very similar.
Yeah. It's like the
Very
best
similar.
practice. It's like what everyone does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. I know we're just wrapping up here now, but I want to ask one final question for you, and maybe it's a two-part question, I guess. So looking forward a little bit in terms of where AI is going and what your plans are for your organizations and what you're seeing. I was curious to get your thoughts on what are you most excited about with AI and the promise of AI and what's happening. And then the second part of that is what is one piece of advice that you would give to our audience who's listening and perhaps in the middle of their journey or looking to move beyond the experimentation? What is one piece of advice that you would leave them with? Luke, I'll start with you. What are you most excited about and one piece of advice?
The whole topic of AI is very exciting to me, so I love talking about all of it. But I think the thing that excites me the most is just I know this is maybe not what people are excited about, but some of the unknown is exciting to me. Being able to know that this technology could take us into very, very great places is exciting to me. So I know sometimes the unknown can be a little bit scary, but for me, that's actually kind of something I'm excited about. And just to keep my answer short, if I were to give you a suggestion or a recommendation, if you're starting with this, if you've got an idea in mind about an agent that you want to start working on or implement in your business or your company, you could spend uh, hours, days, weeks, months ideating on everything you want this agent to do. My recommendation would be to focus your ideas on something specific it can solve for, and then just work for a minimum viable product to release. Just get it going. Just work on it. Because if you're anything like me, I tend to just ideate, and I'll start to think of, oh, it could integrate with this system or that system, and then we could solve it this, so that it could actually do that. We could feed it this data, and all of a sudden, I'm talking about a development project that's going to take years to do. Instead, we needed to launch something quick, get it out in there to start, for people to start using it, and then we just make iterations onto that and development onto that. So that'd be my suggestion.
An idiot in motion goes further than a genius at rest. That's 100%
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Elon, what are you most excited about, and what's your piece of advice?
Well, I mean, Lucas kind of stole my thunder by giving a great answer that I would have given, which is just try it and get experimenting and don't get into analysis paralysis. But I think that from the answers that I've been giving, I would treat AI spend like media spend, and I would treat agents like coworkers, right? If you think about them and the costs and their behaviors in the same way you think about these things that we're used to, it makes those measurements and those processes easier to comprehend because we've all been there. We've all been in a place where we have to manage people and manage media spend in the marketing world. And if we treat the AI like those two things, it becomes infinitely easier to understand what you're doing, and you get much more comfortable with it right away.
Wonderful.
I guess
Peter.
just to wrap. I'm excited about a lot of stuff personally as it relates to like unlocks on medicine and health and progress. But if I was pointing it back at Bitly, I think it just enables our ambition level to go way up. Like the cost to ship goes way down, the things you can build, the aperture of what individual companies can do. So it just allows you to play much bigger than you would have before. So I think ambition is like a good word to attach to like a company to go like your ambition level can go up. And my personal advice would be AI is a two-sided coin. And right now, I'm sure a lot of people, including myself, can ping pong between kind of this doom, what happens, anxiety bomb of like, it's so much information so quickly and I can't keep up and I don't know what to do. And the flip side of that is that it's also just an amazing sandbox to play in and learning. And I guess my advice would be just try as much as possible to embrace the like, if you love learning, I think you're going to do great in this environment. And so you have to lean in to just try to keep learning and know that it's not going to stop. Sometimes there's a like, great, can I just read it, get the book, and then move on? This is a every week, like learning. So the more you get your mindset into that headspace and try to get enjoyment out of that learning and not have it feel, not let the chaos stuff creep in, I think you end up doing a lot better and you'll enjoy it more.
Thank you. Well, wonderful advice. So thank you, all of you, for that guidance and for all of your experiences and lessons learned here today. As we wrap up, I think the one thing that we've definitely heard is and recognized is that AI isn't just another technology trend. It's becoming a fundamental part of how marketing organizations operate. And success isn't defined just by how many agents you deploy, but it's about solving real business problems and empowering your teams and delivering those measurable outcomes. So once again, thank you to our panelists, Peter, Luke, Elon, for sharing your experiences and your insights. I think your perspectives from technology, enterprise operations, and AI transformation have made this a really wonderful and insightful discussion. So thank you again. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope that today's conversation gave you a few practical ideas that you can take back to your own organizations as you continue your AI journey. So on behalf of all of us here at MediaMint, thank you for spending the hour with us. We appreciate your time and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.